We lost more planes in a rescue operation that's supposed to be a great victory. So the basic problem that President Trump faces, this is the basic problem he faces, is he can't go up the escalation ladder because the Iranians can beat him on every rung. It will do much more than destroy his presidency. The consequences would be enormous. He knows this. It's quite clear that basically the Israelis bamboozled President Trump into starting this war. I could tell from the beginning that the deep state was not in favor of this war. I know one or two people on the inside, and you could tell from what people were saying about General Kane's views in the mainstream media that the deep state was not enthusiastic about this war. And of course, we all knew, just having watched Prime Minister Netanyahu over the past 40 years, that he is deeply committed to attacking Iran with the United States and either creating regime change and producing a regime that dances to our tune or wrecking the country. So we knew for sure that Netanyahu was pushing very hard. And the New York Times has now written two big pieces on how the decision was made. And in my opinion, it's unequivocally clear from those two articles that the deep state was not in favor of this war. There were all sorts of individuals who were telling President Trump, these are government officials at the highest level, who were telling President Trump, this is not a good idea, it's probably not going to work. Kane basically said, we don't have a viable military strategy, and the National Intelligence Council produced a report that said it wasn't going to work, and so forth and so on. But what happened is that Mossad convinced both Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump that we could win a quick and decisive victory. You all know the story. What we do is we go in, we launch a shock and awe campaign, and we especially pay attention to decapitating the regime. And once we do that, the whole house of cards will tumble. And the reason that the whole house of cards will tumble is that the regime is built on sand. The foundation is very weak, and all you have to do is topple the leaders, and people will be able to rise up, overthrow the government, and we will get in place a new government that will basically surrender to us. It's quite clear that Netanyahu himself and the head of Mossad, David Barnea, played a key role, the central role, in convincing President Trump that this would work, that this strategy, this shock and awe strategy built around decapitation would produce a quick and decisive victory. And we all know from the international relations literature, when you don't produce a quick and decisive victory, that what happens is the war morphs into a war of attrition. This, of course, is exactly what has happened in the case of Iran. We're now in a war of attrition. And the fact is, we can't win a war of attrition. It's just not possible. Let me just give you 6 points that illustrate that. Think about this very powerful Navy that we have that President Trump talks about using to open the Straits of Hormuz. We can't put that Navy anywhere near Iran, certainly anywhere near the Strait of Hormuz, for fear that it'll get sunk to the bottom of the Jolly Roger by either Iranian cruise missiles or Iranian drones. You understand that the Navy is parked far away from Iran and not, therefore, very useful. Bases. We had 13 bases in the region, 13 major bases in the region. The New York Times has reported that of those 13 bases, all of them are either badly damaged or destroyed. In terms of ground forces, a ground invasion, you know, people in the media talk about 40 or 50,000 troops being located in the Middle East, and this implies that these are 40 or 50,000 combat troops. That's simply not true. You need You need infantry divisions or Marine brigades or whatever to wage combat, ground combat against Iran. And President Trump has only recently moved 7,000 combat troops into the region. 7,000 combat troops. You could do hardly anything with 7,000 combat troops. And if I walked you through all the scenarios where you might think about using those 7,000 combat troops, you would see that this is, not possible to win it's not possible to win any kind of military victory with those small ground forces. In terms of aircraft, do you know that in this rescue operation, we lost more planes in one day than we've lost at any time since the Vietnam War? Just think about that. We lost more planes in a rescue operation that's supposed to be a great victory than we lost on any single day since the Vietnam War. And that was a long time ago. And we fought a long list of wars since then. Then missiles and high-end munitions. You understand we're running out of missiles and high-end munitions. This is catastrophic for trying to contain China. We were supposed to pivot to Asia. We're pivoting away from Asia. We're bringing THAAD missiles. We're bringing Patriot missiles. We're bringing this Marine Expeditionary Unit out of East Asia to deal with the problems we face in the Middle East. This is not the way you want to contain China. This is pivoting away from East Asia, as I said. And then finally, we have no ability to defend our allies in the GCC, right? They're being pounded by the Iranians. That's just the American side. The more interesting side is the Iranian side. They hold almost all the cards. They are in a really powerful position. By cutting off traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, they're in a position to tank the global economy. Just think about that. The leverage that they have is enormous. The consequences of what's happened so far for the international economy are going to be devastating. The fertilizers. People don't talk much about the fertilizers. They talk about the oil and gas. 1/3 of the world's fertilizers come through the Strait of Hormuz. This is planting season in lots of countries. The consequences of all this down the road, many, many people are going to starve to death as a result of this crazy war. But the Iranians, right, they have huge leverage over the world economy. And we, of course, understand that. Furthermore, they have huge leverage over the GCC states, those 6 countries. Why? Because they can destroy them as functioning societies. They can destroy their energy infrastructure, but more importantly, they can destroy their desalination plants. These are big, fat targets, few in number. The Iranians have lots of very accurate missiles and God knows how many drones. They can wreck those countries. This is a serious threat. That gives them huge leverage. So the basic problem that President Trump faces, this is the basic problem he faces, is he can't go up the escalation ladder because the Iranians can beat him on every rung, because they have control of the Strait of Hormuz and they have the ability to wreck the GCC countries. And by the way, do enormous damage to Israel as well. There's a good reason that the Israelis are going to enormous lengths not to let us know what's happening inside their society in terms of hits from missiles, both ballistic missiles and cruise missiles, right? So you just want to understand that. So we can't go up the escalation ladder. And moreover, there's no exit option here except admitting defeat. That's the only way Trump can get out of this, is to basically admit defeat. You see what I'm saying here? You can't go up the escalation ladder, and there's no attractive exit option. And the Iranians are certainly not going to give him an attractive exit option. If you're playing their hand, you want to be incredibly hard-nosed and ruthless with the United States and the Israelis. They are mortal enemies. You understand that from the Iranian point of view, we are an existential threat to them. So they have a deep-seated interest in driving a hard bargain, to put it mildly, and they have a lot of leverage. This is the predicament that Trump is in. So this brings us to Monday. Monday morning, he issues this remarkable Truth Social post, where he says that if the Iranians don't cave, in other words, if the Iranians don't throw up their hands and surrender by nighttime, he's going to destroy Iran as a civilization. He's going to destroy it and make it impossible for Iran to come back from the dead. This is a truly stunning statement. This is another example of genocidal language. Did anybody ever think that an American president would say something like that? I certainly didn't. This is the kind of language that you would expect from someone like Adolf Hitler, right? That you're going to exterminate this country called Iran, erase it from the planet, and make it so it can never come back? Sounds like a Carthaginian solution, doesn't it? What's going on here? You want to ask yourself. What's going on here is Trump is desperate. He's desperate because he understands the basic logic that I just laid out to you. We are playing a losing hand, and the consequences of continuing to play that hand are that the global economy will go off a cliff. It will do much more than destroy his presidency. The consequences would be enormous. He knows this. I'm sure he has people who are telling him that. He's desperate. So what does he say Monday morning? I'm going to turn to extermination. I'm going to turn to genocide. But then you want to think about what happens later that day, Monday evening. He backs off. And what does he do? He basically says, I concede defeat. It's very important to understand that. He basically says, I concede defeat. Now, why am I saying this? First of all, there are two plans on the table. One is the 15-point plan. Those are our demands. That's plan number one, the 15-point plan. And then there's the Iranian plan. That's the 10-point plan. And if you read them, it's like the difference between night and day. If you read the 15-point plan, it has all the typical U.S. and Israeli demands of Iran. And if you read the 10-point plan, the Iranian plan, it has all of their maximalist demands in it. What President Trump says in his Truth Social post, where he basically says, I surrender, is he says that I accept the 10-point plan. He says that. He says it's a solid basis or a sound basis or a good basis for moving forward. Wow, that's really shocking, right? So let's just look a little more carefully at what's going on here. We went into the war, we meaning the United States and the Israelis. I like to call them the tag team. The tag team went into the war with four main goals. Number one was no more nuclear enrichment for Iran. Number two, they have to get rid of all their missiles. Their long-range missiles for sure, anything that threatens Israel. Number three, they have to stop supporting the Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah. And number four, regime change. It's very clear that regime change is the goal. Trump denies that. Others deny it from time to time, others in the administration. But all you have to do is look at the New York Times piece, and it's manifestly clear that we were bent on regime change. That's what David Barnea and Benjamin Netanyahu were talking about, and President Trump. There's no question about that. And you want to remember, President Trump talked about unconditional surrender. This is regime change. So regime change was one of the four principal goals. We have failed at every one of those goals. We're not getting rid of Iranian missiles. We're not getting rid of their nuclear enrichment capability. In fact, their great fear is that they're going to get nuclear weapons, right? And in terms of supporting Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Hamas, there's been no change on that dimension. The Iranians and Hezbollah are actually working together, dealing with the situation in southern Lebanon and northern Israel. And with regard to the Houthis, one of our great fears is that the Houthis, in cahoots with the Iranians, will shut down the strait at the end of the Red Sea, and then there'll be no traffic out of the Red Sea as well as out of the Persian Gulf. This would be really disastrous, right? And we haven't gotten regime change. None of the four goals have been achieved. And furthermore, the Houthis are now in charge of the Strait of Hormuz. On February 27th, they were not in charge of the Strait of Hormuz. They were not threatening to throttle the world economy. They now control the Strait of Hormuz. And they would be out of their minds to give up that control. So I think for as far as the eye can see, Iran is going to be in control of the strait. This is disastrous for the United States. It's just disastrous. Furthermore, if you look at those Houthi demands, they want the sanctions lifted, right? They want U.S. bases out of the region. Now, who knows what the final agreement is going to look like? But if they get any of those demands, this is a shocking defeat for the United States. You just want to understand that. Because as I said to you, the only exit option here, the only exit option was to accept defeat. Exactly what the defeat looks like, not easy to say at this point, but it is a clear defeat.